Today on the 5-Minute Leadership Podcast, we are once again talking about how to solve your leadership shortage. It's a privilege to have Ágúst from Iceland here today. Iceland is one of the least Christian nations in Europe, one of the most atheist and agnostic nations in Europe. Ágúst, welcome to the podcast.
Great to be here. Thank you for having me.
Over lunch today, we were talking about the importance of character when we talk about developing leaders. Give me your thoughts on that. Why is character important, and how do we develop character in leaders?
Well, it's like having a rubber band in your back. I've noticed people that grow up to a point and then something just pulls them back. In my own life, it came to a focal point in January 2009, where I basically had to deal with some things that were swelling up in my inside, things like anger. You know, where did this come from? When I dealt with that, it really helped me a lot, because not dealing with it, it will keep you down for the rest of your life.
That idea of a rubber band pulling you back, I've never heard described that way, but that's a good picture. And I think everyone who is growing in leadership capacity and growing in leadership responsibility, we've all felt sometimes. It's not only what we're pushing in front of us, but there's something pulling behind. But what are ways that that rubber band can be cut or unattached, or however you would describe it?
Being brutally honest about where you're at and stating that to yourself and God helps a lot, because God deals with reality. The moment we create a virtual world where our problems do not exist.
Okay, so we create virtual worlds.
Yes.
All right.
But when I sit down and I really come to grips with who I am, where I am at, etc., then I can start dealing with it. And we may need help. We may need to reach out for counseling. I had a friend in the States. I just picked up the phone and I said, can I come over and work this out with you, you know? And he helped me work through this.
When you talk about a friend that we can pick up the phone and call, I think that's even more important. The more leadership responsibility we have. A lot of times, they say it's lonely at the top, and people who find themselves in leadership positions, sometimes they have lost that type of friendship where we can pick up the phone and say, I'm struggling with this, or I'm having a problem with this, or whether it's internal or something external. And I think that's so important for leaders, that we keep those relationships
vital,
where we can get out of our virtual world that we've made up, that's not really a real world, and get in reality with some people who know us well enough and actually love us enough
to ask the tough questions.
There you go, yeah. And when we give bad answers, they still love us. And they still care, and they actually can help us through that.
Exactly. And then, as you say, when people have more responsibility on their life, things that were not a problem in their character before suddenly become a problem. It's like a tiny crack in the foundation of a house that you don't notice. As you start building layers on that foundation, the cracks become a problem.
And now when you talk about cracks, where you live in Iceland, the tectonic plates are right there.
Right.
And so I'm sure you've experienced a lot of the shaking and a lot of the seismic activity.
Yes.
And in a spiritual way, that's what happens with leaders. I know in the Philippines, we're in an earthquake zone and a volcano zone. I can remember many times we've experienced earthquakes. Fortunately, the high-rise I live in was built to San Francisco standards, which are some of the most strict in the world. Knowing that the foundation is solid and built at a high standard, it gives me a level of comfort that I can make it through the earthquake. I can feel them in my high rise. I can feel it shaking. And I think with Christian leaders, it's so important that those foundations of integrity and honesty and relationships are there. How do we get that? Okay, we get the rubber band off, but what are some ways we can develop character moving forward as leaders?
Well, welcoming the shaking. There are two ways to look at that. You can say, I'm not really like this, and fight against it.
Okay.
But embracing it and even seeing it as a gift that, now I know more about myself. Now I know the truth. And it can be shocking, of course. Obviously, we have our ways to escape from it. We can run from it. We try to even medicate it. But at the end of the day, God loves us too much to leave us alone. I think Dallas Willard said that God is even more interested in who we become than what we accomplish. And with leadership, there's often all this pressure to perform. But I think God is so interested in who I become that He puts that first. And we need to do that also.
Ágúst, thank you. And I want us to end with that thought. As leaders with great vision and leaders who are accomplishing a lot, God is more concerned with who we're becoming than with what we accomplish, because He's actually a Father who cares about us, not as leaders, but as sons and daughters.